shut it down about 5 or 6 years ago. I just leased it out to the state. Anyone here do any guided hunting or anything like that? Don't ever do it. When my dad started it, he went around and talked to different people that do guided hunts, and everyone he talked to said, "Don't do this. Like, do not get into this business." And he was like, I don't think they know what they're talking about. They've been doing it for 10, 20 years. I'm going to do it better, and we'll find a way to make it work. And anyway, we're state walking right now, which in Nebraska, anyone could just walk in and hunt, and that program works out really well for two reasons. The state doesn't complain. Like if you rent your ground out, or you have people that you're guiding, and their check is always on time, and those are the best customers to work with, hands down. But and it's just me today. My dad is out of town, and my wife was going to come join us, but my youngest had 2 eyes and pink eye last night. It was the first week of school, so all the kids are commingling, and all of the diseases are all in the central location. But I'm 5th generation here. I've got a wife and 2 daughters, and I work with my parents to just kind of give you guys some of the logistics. My parents still own the ground, they own the cows, and my wife and I have our own S Corp, and we rent the land and the cows from my parents. So it gives my parents the assurance that we can screw up. It's behind a different corporation, the cows and the ground, and it lets us kind of manage this property the way that we see fit. My dad still does help out day to day, and has turned 71, and my mom is 71 too. So they are still helping out on the farm, but they are retiring and looking to slow down. When I came back, my dad was 59, and a man ages a lot more than 10 years from 59 to 69. And a lot of you in the room has kind of seen that with your parents, and it is very true. It's a heck of a curve. So who do I have in the room here? Raise your hand if you're a livestock producer. That looks like a good 80%. Farmer. Okay, so about half of you. Okay. And we do just dry land farming. Is there irrigation in your county, Jewell County? A little bit. Yeah, we don't utilize any irrigation, so we're all dry land farm. This is Logan Pribbeno. He's our farm manager, and our cattle employees are going to join us for lunch, but they are running around still doing some chores right now, but they will be doing this later. Our farm ground, it's all dry land. We have been on the heels of the worst drought we've ever had. 2022 was the lowest rainfall year in the 150 years history of this ranch or this county. It was a challenge to get through. What was 2022 like in Jewell County? Same. One of the worst ever. Or?
We had fire. We had wildfire.
Okay. Yeah, fire sure doesn't help. Yeah, it was sure a challenge. We had our rolling 12-month rainfall was 9 inches, which just stuff starts to deteriorate. It breaks down, and I see some nods. Some of you guys have seen it. We had pastures that had not been grazed in that calendar year, and you would go and you look at them, and they were going backwards. So everything was just going backwards. I had some friends that we talk a lot about when we met, but man, it was a tough year to be a dryland farmer or rancher. Even the irrigated guys, if they didn't have real good wells, or if it was a split well, they had to let go of one of the crops, and it sure a challenge. And then in 2023, we ended up getting about 7 inches of rainfall in 1 month, and we really thought the drought was over, but it ended up we were below average every month for a year, except for this month in August. So our dryland corn that we're going to go look at, we had an appraiser up. He had appraised it at the single digit. I don't remember that field in particular, but it was all under 10%. And you guys would be surprised when you go when we're driving up there and you see the cornfield. You'd be really surprised. You're going to think, man, that the corn looks good. You know, you wouldn't think they'd be grazing it, but if you go and you start pulling ears, we had Goss's wilt, and we had a very significant pollination problem. So it looks great, and then you kind of peel that ear back, and it's just one of the ugliest looking ears of corn you've ever seen in your life. So we made the decision last week to start grazing that dryland corn. We do like to do grazing crops here. We don't own a combine, trucks, or a grain cart. And the reason for that is, like in 2022, we did not harvest an acre. So it's really difficult to make payments on all of that harvest equipment if you're not even going to use it for an entire calendar year. And it also makes us a little bit more flexible, where if I did have a combine payment, and I had a combine and harvest equipment sitting in the shed there, it'd be harder for us to go up there and graze it. It's a little bit easier when it's custom harvested and you know exactly what it costs, and you can run the analysis as to whether or not you would graze it or not. And our crop rotation is we don't really have a rotation. We do have crops in 2 different areas. We've got our dryland crop ground right here. When you guys came up north, all the dryland on both sides of the road was ours. So we'll grow corn, and then following corn we'll grow a cover crop. We'll always grow a cover crop following corn up here. And we'll either do oats and peas, or we'll do our warm season mix. And it kind of depends on what the grass is looking like and what our cow herd composition is as to whether or not that field will go to oat and peas or like a warm season mix. And out the window right here, this field was oats and peas out there. We grazed it off. The last grazing was just a few weeks ago. It had turned from oats to mostly crabgrass, which is a weed here, but as far as weeds go, it's a very desirable weed for cattle. You guys ever heard of crabgrass or have that same issue? Yeah. So if you like grazing your weeds off, crabgrass is absolutely the best to graze off. So when we do that oat pea mix, we do get a lot of grazing out of it, and we will graze it into August. Joanne went and sprayed it on Saturday, and it will go back to winter wheat in the next 3, maybe 4 weeks. We do have some subsoil moisture, so we'll probably get started right after Labor Day. And then from wheat, we'll grow corn or milo, and then back to a cover crop. So on any given year, approximately 1/3 to 1/2 of our acres are grazing acres or the cover crop acres. On our south farm, which is south of Enders, so it'd be south of here about 40 miles, and it's really good dirt, and it'd be more like your guys' county. This is all very sandy ground. You guys would be surprised when we walk out in these fields, the sand component compared to y'all. But down there, we can grow. We do less grazing. We do a little bit of grazing down there, but we can't graze it in season because of the water, and we still have the same infrastructure. Down there, we will grow dryland soybeans. Is what we've been doing the last 3 or 4 years following corn. And we got about 5 inches in August, this August, and it's going to be very good. I think we're going to cut some very good beans. But we will grow covers down there occasionally. We just really don't have much of a fixed rotation. Any questions about the farm ground or farmer rotation? I should tell you, I did get some hats And if you ask a good question early on, you get a wine glass out.
It's been on my mind.
I got it. So there's a little honey in the pot for you.
What year did your family come?
Sure, that's a good story. Like many of you guys, my great grandfather who fought with the Union in the Civil War, Sher McCoy, he took the train as far as you could take the train, which was Elsie, Nebraska, and he walked the last 20 miles to where the house is down there, and he put up a sod homestead. And, just one of the homesteaders, like so many of
So what year?
1888. So it'll be about 140 years we've been doing it. And funny story about Sherm. So he built a soddy. He was married and had one kid at the time, and my grandma was nursing a newborn in the soddy. Did you guys have soddies in Jewell County? Yeah, because there's no lumber far enough away. My great-great-grandmother, Susie, was nursing a newborn in the soddy, and a rattlesnake came out of the roof and landed on her. Didn't bite her or anything like that. And she told my great-great-grandfather, she said, I'm leaving. I'm going back to my family in Iowa, and you send for me when you got a wood house built. Took him 2 years, and he would go to Iowa, in the off season, and they would visit. But yeah, she left for 2 years until they built a stick house. Yeah. So I mean, those were, you look at, like, we're sitting here in AC, the tractors drive themselves. I mean, you think about what our family had, what we go through. It's a night and day comparison. I mean, our AC goes out in our tractors. If it's in the summer, man, we got to get John Deere Tech out there and get them to fix it. This is unbearable. And what they did with teams of horses and what they did, I have a lot of respect for. I don't know that I could be that tough to farm with a team of horses, but I think all of you guys kind of came and raised that way. Any other questions? Yeah, here we go.
Can you talk a little bit about the stocking range figure when you plant cover crops?
Sure. And actually, I got one of these for every other one of you, and it kind of just gets you thinking, but it kind of has like an overview. And just share with the person by you. So when we grow cover crops, and that's a really good question, the 10,000 foot view is our philosophy is different than, does anyone know Jacob Miller by Culbertson? He has that live wire? Okay. Jacob Miller is a friend of mine. We get our fencing supplies from him. He and we visit with each other pretty frequently. He is almost all irrigation, so he grazes it up. So when he grazes a crop, he grazes it with the intention of returning back to it. Where we are dry land, and by the time we get to grazing, you just can't buy a rain for $1 million. So what we do is it's a grow it and mow it. So and we'll kind of see some of this when we get up there, but we just kind of got started. But we'll take about 700 to 1,000 yearlings is a group size that we like to run, and we will fence them on about like 10 acres. And we will graze it until it is gone, and it will look, and when we leave, and we only graze approximately 20 to 30% of the plant matter, so when we leave, it is a mat of stems, essentially. And there's some spoilage on the leaf and some other good parts, but it's mostly the stems, which don't have any good grazing value anyway. And using that method, we typically get 100 steer days per acre. Is kind of the metric that I use, and you can kind of translate that how you will. But the interesting thing about the warm season cover crops is, we've turned out on them when they were about waist high, and you tend to get about 100 steer days an acre, but you end up taking most of the plant, right? Because most of it is vegetative and edible. And we've also turned out onto our warm season cover crop when it's been 15 foot tall, and it still is about 100 steer days an acre, because they're just about the same leaf matter in that plant, no matter what the maturity is. On our oat pea mix, we don't quite do that. We'll do about 80 steer days an acre. which is pretty typical with the cool season. You just don't quite get as much yield out of the cool season. And Jacob Miller, who has a different philosophy, has kind of observed the same thing. You tend to get more utilization or more grazing days out of a warm season versus a cool season crop. And then, and just one more thing on that, and when we graze our warm season, we do use the poly. When we graze like our oat pea mix like this, or like triticale or wheat, we don't do any sort of poly or any sort of cross fencing. We just graze it and try to get the right stocking rate and leave them alone.
So how often are you moving on the use of poly wire and stuff every day? Or?
No, we have done it every day. It's almost a little too efficient to do it every day, and also building polywire every day just sucks. You know, polywire it's one of those things where like the first few times you do it, like this isn't so bad, and then year like 3 or 4, you're like, this has got to go. Like, I do not want to be married to this role. So what we've kind of settled on is about 2 or 3 breaks a week. And one thing with poly that took me a while to learn was, like on Friday, we will do an allocation so that you don't have to do it first thing Monday morning. Just because maybe you were off. I mean, maybe you were off by, 100 foot of what you're supposed to fence in. And I just learned the hard way. I showed up on a Monday and going to move poly is not it. So on Friday, we'll do a break so we could just do it Monday afternoon or even like Tuesday morning. And I think we could be a little bit better if we polyed every day or every other day, but not worth the effort for us on our purpose.
You have to come back on what they were before.
We will just keep moving them, and if there is, we don't plan on regrowth because it, rains in the summer here. We're far enough west that if it does rain in July or August, it's a big event. So like, our average rainfall for August is 2 inches. 90% of the time, that is a 2-inch rainstorm that happens at some random day in August. And so what we will do is if there is regrowth, we'll come back and graze it in the fall and winter with some calf or something like that. So we don't count on it, so we do not count on it for the summer grazing, and if there is the regrowth, we'll come back and hit it later on. Any other questions? We'll hand up this one.
I'll ask the question, how did Wine Glass Ranch come about? I read your video, I watched your video, I watched all the stuff, and there was never a mention about wine glass.
Well, good. I will tell you about it. I'm glad you asked. My great-great-grandmother, Susie, the one who moved back to Iowa, she was the one that registered the wine glass brand, and it was right after Prohibition had ended. And she liked drinking wine. At that point, it was clear that it wasn't going to be a McCoy running the ranch, so that she didn't want to do the M brand, which is more traditional. And it was post-Prohibition, and she registered the wine glass brand to celebrate. She loved drinking wine.
That's the rest of the story.
Yeah. They were Irish, so that's the other part of the rest of the story. They're Irish people that really enjoyed a glass of wine every now and then, and for the 10 years that they couldn't do it during Prohibition, it was maybe a little bit difficult, I imagine.
On your counter, how do you go about rotating while you're counting, like in May?
Sure, that's a really good question. We have been doing rotational. My dad went to Rancher for Profit. Who here has been Rancher for Profit or is familiar with the program? Okay, a couple of you guys. With rotational grazing systems, who's familiar with like rotational grazing systems? Okay, kind of the same group. Gotcha. My dad went to Rancher for Profit with Stan Parsons in 1988 in Fort Collins, Colorado, and took it all in. I don't know. There's a lot of history there. I don't know how much history you really want to hear, but there were a lot of owners in the ranch at the time, and it was very difficult difficult for my dad to manage. He showed up at that right at a very critical time in his life where the ranch was needing something, and that 7-day class completely transformed this ranch, and is really probably the one reason that I am standing here. So he came home and he's like, we're going to go all in. He sold all of the haying equipment. We started putting up fences in the 90s, and a lot of the other things from that program from a management standpoint. He also, at that point, there were a lot of landowners that were involved, a lot more than there were now, and he created that system where he put all of those landowners in their own corporation that owned the land and the cattle, and he and my mom had the operating company so that they could have a little bit of flexibility and freedom, and that it was very helpful. So he came back and we started rotationally grazing in the 90s, thereabout, and we had been trying to figure out how to calve and rotationally graze for 20 years, and about 5 or 6 years ago we quit. And the reason for that, and I think you can get away with it, what we have been doing is going to about 200 head groups. And so we'll calve in a 200 head group, and we'll move that 200 head group like 4 times during calving. So 4 times over like 45 days. So not a very intense system. And we have tried running groups of 7, 8, 900. My dad has run 1,000 pairs in one group, and it's very, very difficult to do. It is almost impossible to do while you're calving. And the reason for that is, and many of you guys know this, but it's not something you think about every day. A cow cannot visually identify her calf. So a cow can't go look across the field and say, there's my calf, I can tell because it's got the white nose. It has to smell that calf. So when you go to move 1,000 pairs and you need them to pair up, each mama cow has to go and sniff every calf. It's a process that is terribly inefficient, and is not designed by nature for that to happen in those large groups. Cattle are not bison. Bison are meant to kind of be in large groups. With cattle, the more I am learning about them, and the more I do this, the more I am certain that they are not designed to be run in these large groups. But we do that here at Wineglass. It's sort of a compromise, and so you need to know when to kind of get pretty intense and when to not be intense. So what we do now, and we've been doing this about 5 years, and it's been working really good. And this would be a great question to ask my 2 cow bosses too when they come up to join us. But we like to run about 800 pairs in a group is about the right size for us. And so we'll calve them in 200 head groups, and then we'll brand them and consolidate them over the course of June. And then by the 4th of July, basically, we got those 800 pairs. The calves are tough enough that when we rotate them around, if they don't see mom for 6 hours, it's not a problem, because by the time July comes around, they're 250 pounds, and they just don't need mom's attention like they do the first probably 40 days if they're born. Do you have experience rotating while calving?
Well, the more we move down back, April, May,
Yeah.
the more of an issue it has been.
Yeah.
So that's what we found, trying to find a way.
I,
Do we just open all the gates and let them have everything and then come in and get them back together? Or, that's what I was just asking.
Yeah.
On your side of the group, what you guys do?
Well, what we will do is we'll give them, we run about 10 acres a pair. It's pretty standard right around here. Our neighbors give a little bit more, we give a little less, kind of depending on the year, but everything that we went through, I'll get into a little bit more about me, but I've been back 12 years farming and ranching, and I still have not yet to see that typical year, where it's like 10, it just doesn't. It's like, I don't know if we've ever actually given our cows 10 acres. It seems like it always needs to be 14 or 7. It's hard to catch that average. But we're giving about 3 or 4 acres at cap. And that just gets into the 4th of July after branding, and then we're consolidating it, and then they're getting their 7. And you know, and we have been calving since the 90s, early 90s. So we have been trying it. We've had multiple people, multiple employees, multiple owners, multiple different types of cattle, you know, in that 30-year period. And it just, if everything is perfect, you can do it. And if you have a good spring, you can do it. And everything just goes super low, like you can do it. It just never ever happens perfectly. It's like, and it seems like you would do it, and then for the longest time you wouldn't have any trouble, but then you have one bad day. And in cow-calf systems, one bad day, you guys know this, you get one bad day, and then, you know, you got a little sickness in your calves. And then you got a lot of sickness in your calves, and then it's a disaster. Like one bad day with a big group of pairs is going to lead to things not happening. And so we've just completely backed off on it. And here's how I tell them when I go to bed at night, because I was raised rotationally grazing. So like my dad, who I wish he was here today, you know, like so many, like rotational, everyone's talking about rotational grazing. I grew up watching it work. And, you know, a lot of you guys, you went to Ranch for Profit, and you had to go back to the farm or the ranch, and you had to tell your dad or grandpa, you're like, hey, I want to try rotational grazing. And they're like, well, that's not going to work here, you know? Like, I didn't have any of that. I was able to be raised, like when I was in junior high, they were rotating big groups around here, and, you know, and I saw this ranch be revived because of that rotational grazing, because it was just coming back, and a lot of those climate species were just really coming back from the rest, and so I never really had that. So for me to say I set stock is like almost it's a shameful word, but in the spring when you're managing the flush, I think you can get away with set stocking in the month of May. I think that you got, and we catch rains in May here, even in a drought. We get a rain a week, it almost seems like, and it feels a lot more like Missouri than Western Nebraska. 90% of the Mays that I've experienced here. And I think you can get away with set stocking in the spring for a lot of unique reasons, and I think it has affected our grass growth a little bit, but from the calf health and calf survivability, it more than makes up for kind of what we lose on the grass health. You guys passed my neighbor Maddox Cattle Company. They were right in that valley when you guys were coming up before the hills. And if you want to be the best grass manager in the world, and they all run pairs, but we get along. You want all yearlings. You want 100% yearlings, because if you've got a weird rotational system and you need to go move a large group of pairs or yearlings, and you need to go 5 miles that direction, and you need to go there tomorrow, you can do that with yearlings. You can get 1,000 yearlings 5 miles in a couple hours. With pairs, though, not going to happen. Just not going to happen. Just moving them anywhere but through the next gate is just asking for trouble. So, and then you could do. We were talking a little bit about this. You have a bad day with pairs. Next thing you know, you got sick calves. You're mass treating. Yearlings are just a lot more forgiving. So if you screw up a little bit because you're trying to focus on the grass versus maybe the gain on the cattle, yearlings are forgiving. They won't die. I mean, you can't even hardly kill the thing, it seems. They won't die. And the one thing I really like about yearlings is any idiot can run them. If you drive out to a group of yearlings and they're walking the fence, you've got a problem. It's water or it's feed. And if they're not walking the fence, they're out grazing, you're good. So it just doesn't take a lot of experience to manage large groups of yearlings well. You just need kind of common sense. So if you really want to manage your grass and be the best grazer ever, an all yearling system is the way to go. And Emery Birdwell down there, in Texas, Henrietta, Texas. He runs just yearlings. He runs about 5,000 yearlings in one group. And I went down there with the manager of Mattis Cattle and saw it. And it's the best grass growing system that there is. He uses a lot of poly and grows it up. It's just, sometimes you gotta, when you're running pairs in the grass, sometimes you gotta be better on the pairs and less on the grass. So that was about a 10-minute answer to a very, very simple but very good question. So thank you.
So to piggyback off that, I was just kind of doing the math in my head. You're having like 150, 60 acre paddocks during calving.
That's about right. Yeah, they're roughly about 200 acres, and there's not a typical paddock size really. We kind of fence for topography, so this is really sandy sandhills country, and so we really try to fence off the hills versus the valleys and the bottoms. So we run fences. We tend to run fences where there is soil changes and not in convenient, I've been to a ranch in Jewell County, maybe like this, in northeast Colorado, where what they did was they took every section and they split every section and put a water point on each one. And they could do that because, a hill for them is, goes up like that, and it's pretty flat country. Whereas here, we have hills made of sand that if you run a fence over it, you're going to kind of create a trailing problem. So there's not an average paddock size here, unfortunately.
What breed of cattle works the best, or black influence, or what?
Sure. Well, my dad, he learned that he did not have the right cows in the 90s to do the system that he was doing. It was, they had been calving in February and March up until then, and he, in the 90s, took it upon himself to kind of create an animal that could thrive in this setting. And what that animal looks like is it's a shorter, easy fleshing, wide muzzled. We're going to go up and look at our replacement, so you're kind of going to be able to glance at it a bit. But he changed the genetics of our cow herd in the 90s to really create an animal that could thrive in an all grazing scenario. And it is, low frame score. We don't have big cows. You'll be really surprised at our replacement heifers. They're probably weighing 700 pounds, whereas, I've seen 1,000-pound replacement heifers, as I'm sure you guys have. And if you go sell them to Ogallala, those 1,000-pound bred heifers will bring, buku bucks. Whereas if I try to sell something like I have in Ogallala, they definitely gonna ding me because it's like this animal doesn't even look like it could be bred, but they do. And one of the things that we did to really help with the cow herd genetics is, and Bert Teicher helped us with this. Bert Teicher came about 10 years ago, right when I came back, to help me. He visited us for about 2 days, and to help me kind of institute some changes, and I guess I was smart enough to realize back then that it would sound smarter coming from Bert to my dad versus me, who'd been farming for about 2 years at that time. So we had Bert come, and we were Hereford Angus, and we're still 90% Hereford Angus, but we added continental breeds in very, very, very small doses, so you won't be able to see them out there, but we added a little bit of Fleckbay, a little bit of Simmental, a little bit of Gelby, and a little bit of Limousine. All of those at 2%. So you just can't even tell, but the hybrid vigor has really helped. And the other thing that we did was, and you'll see this, like our heifers we'll probably get 60% breeder farm replacement heifers. We are pulling out the bulls currently, which is quite a process. Come to find out, it cost us a couple 4-wheelers yesterday. I've never seen it like this, but they did not want to leave that cornfield. They knew that we weren't going to go give, you pull the bulls off. I think they knew that we weren't going to go give them their own cornfield, but we kind of rough our heifers along, and we don't try to get 90 or 100% of them bred. We want only the fertile, easy fleshing ones to enter the cow herd, because we have an opportunity to sell those open heifers, and we will this fall after credit check, and they're going to bring over $2,000 a head, and that's when we want to cull that animal. So we want to gate guard the cow herd. We don't want we want it to be very hard to get into the cow herd. You know, we want only those that can really get it done, and to do that, we need to be really selective on the replacement heifer. So for the last 10 years, we've had a 50 or 60% breed upon our replacement heifers, where we really only let the best in. And we'll use very low bull numbers as well. We'll use like one bull with 50 replacement heifers. Like we only want the high libido girls in the cow herd, right? You know, like they make them work for it. So we've done kind of those two things to help us get the herd going, because it does require a special animal to, especially in a sandhill system. I mean, in the sandhills, we grow a lot of grass. We really, per inch of rainfall, we grow more grass than any other grassland in the United States of America. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is we have large bunch grasses, but they're just standing water. They're very low quality. So it does require a special animal, and my dad kind of started on that in the 90s. Any other questions about genetics?
How does she can breed up your cows since it's when, nothing heifers?
It's really helped. I mean, substantially. So, you'd probably know with a May calving, you end up turning out your bulls in August, and that's when kind of the pastures are, burnt out, and the protein is declining. And it has been one of the, it's just been, if you're a May calver, and there's a lot of people going to it, and it's very popular, and the one area that it really costs you, it seems, is that breed up. So before we kind of changed things, about 10 years ago when I came back and had Burke help us, a good breed up for us was probably like 80, in the 80s. A really good breed up would be in the upper 80s, and a bad breed up it hit 79 or like 78, which just can be brutal. And since we've made those changes, a good breed up will be about 95, and a bad breed up will be about 85, 86, 87, kind of thereabouts. So it bumped it by about 10 points, which, for May calving, it really has helped that. And I think if I had to choose, I think the Continental crosses helped a little bit. Because, man, just getting really fertile girls in the cow herd and keeping them, I think that was probably 90% of the change.
Are you going hard on the heifer before you put them in?
Nope, we will expose, not 100%, but 95 probably, and we used to do that, and that's one of the things Burke suggested to us. He said, let God or Mother Nature pick them. Let the bulls pick them. You don't pick them, because what you think is pretty and desirable may not have anything to do with what your goals are for the herd. So, interestingly enough, and we're gonna start brake checking them here not too long. And when you're hard on them, a lot of the ones where you're like, I really like the way that heifer looks. You know what I mean? You're like, that's kind of what and thank God it was Burke who kind of told us, because it's like, and then the ones with horns and socks kind of end up getting bred, and you're like, well, I don't want my cow herd looking like that. But Burke would back up and he'd say, well, do you want a pretty cow herd defined by the human, or do you want a productive cow herd? And I was glad that he told me that, because you're just like, you end up watching, you're like, well, you go through your coal pen, you're like, man, I'd really like my cow herd to look more like these. And then some of the breds, it's, if she gets it done, if she gets bred and weans a calf, that's what I want out of my cow herd. And you'll see, we do have a lot of color ups with the Hereford cross, and you get some funny colorations when you have those continentals, it seems. And we sort those off, and a lot of guys I know, neighbors included, they see their neighbors selling their black calves next to theirs, and maybe there's a couple brown ones on there, and the mixed up blocks, they bring $4 less, and they just can't. stand to see that, right? I cannot sell my calves for $4 less than my neighbor. I just cannot stand it. And they went to all black, no heterosis, no nothing, and you know, what I like to say, and this is a Burke Tykert idea, is, you know, have a multicolored cow herd, have a multicolored calf crop, just sort them up, right? So just bring all of your reds to town, and then all of your blacks to town, and then they'll bring good money, and then there's a trailer load of stuff that, you know, you don't want anyone to see. So at night you drop those off, and they sell those before the sale starts. What's that?
Those grazing by the highway.
Yeah, we end up grazing by the highway typically because they're handy. But yeah, there's always a trailer load of, you know, the funny markings, and you just make sure just don't let them see those. All right.
For bulls, do you raise your own men in this system, or how are you doing that?
We are pretty typical. We are about half home-raised bulls, and I'm going to have TJ Ellicott talk a little bit about that when he comes for lunch. He and my dad have the exact, and TJ Ellicott, he grew up on a family ranch about 30 miles from here. Still runs it. His mom is on the ranch. It's just not big enough for 2 families. So he works 90% of the time here, 10% of the time there. So he was born and raised on a ranch, has a passion for grazing genetics, and he does our bull selection process, and he looks a lot at the mother when he does that. A lot more at the mother than he does the bull calf, if that makes sense. And, you know, good teats, and I'll let him expound a little bit on that. And we buy bulls, like we run registered bulls on our heifers, you know, because we want to be darn sure that they're calving these, because we've got pretty small cows compared to our neighbors, so we don't want to pull a lot. And you know what, that cow, we buy from 4 or 5 different bull provider types. We're not loyal to any one of them. One of them is farrow, and a lot of the other farrow type genetics is what we use to kind of get our cow herd to where it is. But we're pretty happy with where we got it. So we've been mostly home raised, well, since Bert came about 10 years ago, and he said he's like, make these few changes, and he said, I think, you know, you need to start just selecting from in. You don't have anywhere to really go with this cow herd. I think you've got it, and so just start kind of selecting within, and he kind of helped us. One thing we're doing that, you know, if you guys do any home raised stuff, we're always keeping the ones out of the older cows for longevity. And Bert suggested, he said, you know, probably don't do that. Select bulls out of your H2, so your second calf heifers, because you're probably making a little bit of genetic progress, and so that is more evident in your younger animals. And so we started, because we were keeping bulls out of our 10, 12-year-old cows, and we did switch that based on his recommendation. Other questions?
You guys ever thought about going down the road and adding other species, sheep, goats?
Yep, that is a great question. My friend Brock Terrell, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of him, but he's by Hay Springs, so he's in the Panhandle, far western Sand Hills, as far, you know, before it turns into the bluffs of Scotts Bluff in Wyoming. He has been running sheep for about 10 years now. And the ranch that we send all or most of our yonis to a ranch in Wyoming, and they are mostly sheep. So I am familiar. My friend Brock says you can run 1 sheep to 1 cow and not change your stocking range. So if you run 1,000 cows, you can run 1,000 ewes, and you don't need to account for anything. They'll just run. But I'll tell you, Brock, who's sharp, I like him. During COVID, he lost his H2A shepherd that had been coming back, and the sheep were sold within a month when he had to do the work. And he was, to be clear, he was making money on the things, but he's like, he said, I underestimated the skill and the amount of work one of these Peruvian guys does by a factor of 10. And so he sold them, but he bought back last year and got his shepherd back. So I have not, it's the funny thing that they call them the mortgage lifters. So you run sheep, to help make ends meet, and then as soon as you make ends meet, you sell the sheep, you go back to cattle. I don't know what it is. It's just a European. I don't understand it, but I haven't had to yet, so I guess I have not run sheep. But I do have friends that do, and I think Alan Nation said in word that. So we've got cows grazing this range and have for 140 years, and he said, no matter how well you're grazing, if it's monospecies grazing, you are absolutely moving out of the direction of the desired plants of that species, because for 100 years they've been grazing what they like, and he said, you get multiple species on there, and it is really good for the grass diversity and bringing it back, because the sheep do eat different things. And there were, on one of our ranches, it was traditionally run as a sheep ranch, and there is no sage on part of that ranch. It's a little bit's come back, but they will sure graze that sagebrush. Interestingly enough, there's double the yuccas. So it's not like you kind of made some headway on getting rid of the sage. It just, Mother Nature just filled it in with yuccas and instead of the sage. But I would conclude that by saying, there are 5 of us that work out here, and if I was on a smaller scale and could kind of handle it myself, I think I would be more inclined to do it. But for now, just the cattle. Any other questions? I'll kind of give you guys a rundown about my life journey. People find it kind of interesting, but my dad required that I knew I wanted to come back. I worked out here in high school, and I knew I was going to come back and farm a ranch. I really fell in love with the Sandhills ecosystem, the grassland ecosystem. I do like farming. Me and my dad do all of the farming with Jewell on. But I really like the grassland ecosystem in my youth. And my dad, he went to UNL, studied ag econ, and he moved back. He was kind of needed, but he moved back the day he graduated from UNL. My parents said, if you want to come back and you want to farm and ranch, you need to be gone for 10 years. And you need to leave the state, and you need to leave agriculture. We want you to be nowhere around this. He said, you need to learn about business and management, and he's like, that's going to serve you a little bit better. So I went to school in California. I went to school on the coast, a place called University of California, Santa Barbara. It is a party school on the beach. I had a lot of beer, and I had a lot of good time. I learned nothing about growing corn. No one there knew anything about growing corn or cattle. So it was a good life experience. I met my wife there. My senior year there. She's from Huntington Beach, California. I brought her home to Imperial, Nebraska, the town of 2000. On our first date, I told her, and gosh, you guys don't. People from California are a different breed. They really are. They're very different. And the prospect of being drugged to Nebraska is not high on the list of things that they want to have happen in their lives. So on the first date with my wife Brianna, and I wish she could be here, but pink guy will do that. I told her, I said, I'm moving to Nebraska, and by Nebraska I don't mean Omaha. We were talking pretty much the middle of nowhere, and I kind of knew that she was the one when she's like, oh, that actually sounds like a lot of fun. I've always wanted to live in a small town. I'm like, oh, well, I got a proposition for you. But that was 4 years in, so I had to be gone for 10 years. So I moved to Silicon Valley and worked in financial consulting for a firm there, which is just a fancy way to say we would go to startups who had small accounting departments, like 1, 2, 3 people accounting departments. And I studied economics at college, and we would just show up, and before a board meeting, we would just clean up their books, present packet financial information to the board meetings. And so I did that for 6 years. And I lived in San Francisco before it all kind of went downhill. It was a very fun city that's kind of been destroyed by COVID and Gavin Newsom. That's not either here nor there. So yeah, and kind of interestingly enough, my dad, he said 10 years. He said, you got to be gone for 10 years. And he was the one who called me, and it was April. It was 9 years, 10 months. And he said, and we had a deal where I could only come on if there was a job opening. I couldn't just come home the day I decided. He told me, he said, whenever there's an opening, I'll let you know, and we'll bring you in. Yeah, he called me, and it was right when my wife and I were looking at buying a house and doing all the family stuff, and the timing worked out really perfect. So I've been farmer for 12 years, but I lived in California and kind of did the financial thing for 10 years. And there are advantages and disadvantages. I will tell you, the advantages are I have got good experience, business experience. Someone other than my dad taught me how to manage people, how to do the finances, and all of those life skills, which was valuable. It's hard to learn stuff from your father. It just can be very difficult to learn things from your father. So it was very good that I got away and was able to kind of get some perspective. I'll tell you, on the flip side though, I had neighbors that studied at Colorado State, Kansas State, and UNL, and became really good at management, really good farmers. They got a leg up on me, and they were growing when this business was not growing, and they've got some distance ahead of me. So I do appreciate my life experience. It was the best advice a father could give to his son, right? I would be a better ranch manager if I went to K-State and studied livestock management and came back right away and started learning. But it was good advice from a father to a son, and I'm really glad he made me do it, because it was very hard. So I came back in 2002 was my first year, and that was the second worst drought in the history of this county. And, I've got experience the first and the second worst droughts in those 12 years. So I have learned a lot in 12 years of farming and ranching. I still have a lot to learn too. Any other questions? I got about 10 minutes before lunch. We still got 2 halves.
Just gonna ask you, have you ever got caught in the winter time, if had snowstorm or anything, lost a bunch of cattle or anything?
That's a great question. How was the winter of 22 and 23 in Jewell County? 23, 24? We had my dad's 71. We had the worst winter in his lifetime. He says 83 was right up there, probably about the same. So it would have been neck and neck versus the 22 to 23. And we don't have a feed truck. We do have one bale bed. We do feed a little alfalfa for cabin heifers and just random stuff. But we don't have a feed truck. Don't have a baler. We're a grazing organization and operation. It was December, and it started snowing the second week in December, and we got 10 inches. And then it melted, and so we're on corn stalks at this time. We are 90% on corn stalks. And it had melted, and then the next week it rained. It rained 2 inches in December, which is weird. I mean, we were on the heels of the drought too, and it's like, what the F is this? And so we had about 2 inches of ice, and then it snowed on top of that, and it snowed some more on top of that, and maybe a little bit more. It was very brutal. It was difficult to manage. We got through it with just supplemental feed. What we learned that way, and my Mattis Cattle Company, they do have feed trucks, they do have commodity areas. Everyone that could brought their cows home and fed them. Feed was very expensive too, but they did bring, anyone who had the ability to feed at home did it. We didn't. I mean, you couldn't buy hay that winter for anything. You know, even if you were offering 300, it just wasn't out there. So we kept the cows out there, and we hooked our planting tractor up. We have a 8 Series John Deere 300 horse. We put a cake wagon on it, which is, our cake wagons are those old fertilizer spreaders. So we just take off the PTO. That way you can carry 3-ton cubes at a time. So John would go and we'd cake them about 6 pounds per head per day. Because what we learned that winter was, it wasn't that they couldn't eat, it was those cows were able to eat something, but what they were having to do was kind of put their nuzzle into the snowbank, and they had to eat what came up. You know, versus a regular winter for us and for you guys, the cow was able to select the husks and the leaves and have a pretty good, select the corn and have a pretty good diet. Well, this winter she was able to eat stuff, but we were actually eating the stalk this time. So we supplemented, and we do work with a consulting nutritionist that comes out and looks at everything every other month, and we got by with just supplementation, and it worked. But the reason I think it worked is because there was no plan B. If I did have a feed pile, and all my neighbors, were bringing cows home and feeding them, I think I would have. There's really something to be said, especially if you're a farmer or rancher. Sometimes, you got your back against the wall, and there's only one way to get out. You figure out how to make it work, and I think that's what happened. Any other questions?
You mentioned you have pollinator areas.
Yep.
Do you bring in beekeepers to bring it out, or is that just mainly native pollinators to try to boost those populations and help with the call?
Yeah, that's a real good question. We don't bring in beekeepers. I just never have had the opportunity to bring in a beekeeper. It is just for local pollination. Cool thing about that was again, this is something my dad instituted, and I just get to kind of run with it and show it off. But he made those pollinator habitats. So I'm going to back up a little bit here. What is a pollinator habitat? So if you actually look at an aerial view of our ranch, any low spot, which is frequent in southwest Nebraska, we have those playas that they're wetlands like 50% of the time. You can never grow a crop in one of them. Because it's always, every year, even in a drought, it's always wet for a couple weeks out of the year. Really important for migrating birds. And my neighbors, they deep brook them every year. And, for 140 years, they have not grown a crop on this, but they always are like, this will be the one ripping that cures it, but it doesn't ever work. So my dad went and he's like, we're gonna give up on these areas. And we're going to go look at this too, and we talk a little bit more about there, but he said any mag hill, any high spot that's prone to blowing, and any of these low spot playas that are temporarily wet, we're going to roll all of those into the USDA wetlands program. And he did that 20, 30 years ago. And kind of an interesting tidbit on that, when I had come back, my dad really hadn't been doing cover crops at all, and doing a lot of this farmland grazing. I was doing a lot of farmland grazing. We'll do up to half of our farm ground acres every year. Well, you guys know what it's probably like to put a polywire exclusion into some of the best grazing in the field. you know, it is a pain in the butt to keep the cattle out of it. They get the fence down, and anyway, so after doing the cover crops for a few years, I told my dad, I was like, we're only able to keep them out of about half these lagoons and different areas, and they're just 3 or 4 acre areas too. So I was like, I told him, like, on a field level, like it's a pain. We're letting 5 acres be a real pain, you know. He said, I told him, I was like, I'm gonna take these out when I can. And he said, well, the program, it goes on for another 2 years. So why don't you wait for 2 years, and if you want to take them out then, you can take them out. And I said, okay, fine. And in the meantime, I got a call from our agronomist, and they were spraying for Western bean cutworm on the dryland corn just north of us. That's back when corn was actually worth something. People were managing it a little different. He said, oh, they're spraying north of you. I am sure that we're going to have to spray for aphids and Western bean cutworm on you. And we're walking along, and my agronomist Greg, he's counting, things you don't want, basically. And I'm counting ladybugs and different things that you do want. And we kind of get to the end of the field, and he's like, well, yeah, I counted this many eggs, and I saw this many Western bean cutworms. He said, I pull up the UNL calculator, and it's like, oh yeah, the application cost is 20, and he's like, I think we need to spray for Western bean cutworm here. And I was like, Greg, did you see the ladybugs and all the other bugs that were in this field? So I told him, I'm like, I think my ladybugs are going to die because they're going to run out of Western bean cutworm. Like, the last thing I need to do is come here and spray it. And I talked with him, and he's still our agronomist. I really like him. He understands our kind of no-till system, but I saw it. Count them here. Are there more ladybugs or more Western, bean cutworm? And count with me. He's like, there's more ladybugs here. And he told me, he said, you're the only field that's like that. And he's like, why do you think that is? And we got to talk about it. It's like, it's these pollinator areas. They are the habitat for these non, the predator bugs, essentially. And so I'll take you guys out there. One thing I really like to tell farmers is we enrolled we took the worst 2% on all of our farm acres that we never grazed a crop on, that blew and was wet, and we set it to the habitat. And as a result of that, it has increased our yield. We took the worst 2%, increased our yields. We have never, ever had to spray insecticide of any type for any reason. It's been a total win-win. And I'm glad we're gonna go look at this, because I got some farmers, some ranchers, but it's like, don't fight the worst 2%. Set it aside, and the government pays us for it. So we're doing good. Everything's benefiting, and then you get a check for the bad ground at the end of the year anyway. So it's one of those cool win-win that we're going to go look at one of those on the tour. Looks like they're setting up the food.
It's your, yeah.
Yep.